We need to start over.
That's good.
I did not have the soundboard on.
That's good. We'll do better. We'll do better, hopefully.
All right. Well,
You would think we didn't know our story, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Just to get started with, introduce yourselves.
Okay, Eddie Honeycutt, grew up in Catawba County. Patty and I met at Jones Fish Camp. Took me a long time, but on August 26, 1973, I finally worked up the courage just to show up at her house unannounced on my motorcycle. And
Hey, it's your host, Rick. I thought I should stop and add a little disclaimer here. Eddie says he doesn't have any pictures of himself on his bike. Sure, Eddie. Whatever you say. We've got a picture of Patty with her motorcycle. Stay tuned for that one, but none of Eddie. Sorry, folks. I tried. Anyway, back to our video.
looking back, I'm thankful she was there.
I'm Patty Hayes Honeycutt, and I grew up in Alexander County. First daughter of 5 children of a farmer, and grew up on a tobacco farm, Black Angus cattle, hay fields. Mom and Dad owned a little country store. And as Eddie has already said, when I was 15 and a half years old, my mom and dad let me go to work just a couple of nights a week at Jones Fish Camp just to earn a little money to call my own. And Eddie was not there at that time. His brother owned the seafood restaurant, but it was one of 3 Jones Fish Camps, and Eddie was actually working either in Denver or at Hickory at that time. But there was one particular Saturday night that we had a lot of folks out sick, and his brother called and said, send Eddie to Stony Point. And so that tall, lanky kitchen manager walked in, and I thought, But then I learned he was a pretty rough, tall, lanky kitchen manager, and I was dating a Christian boy at that time, and I thought, no, I'll just stick with what I've got.
Girls always go for the bad boy.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Not then, Rick. Took me a little while.
That's the way it works. All right. So tell me a little bit about your lives pre getting together. What was like? Well, how old were you when you first started dating?
17. I was 17.
21.
Yeah.
Okay.
17 and 21.
Yeah.
So tell me about your life before meeting Patty.
Okay, I grew up at home with mom and dad and one brother that lived at home with us. We lived in an older home without indoor plumbing and with very little indoor electricity. It was kind of a sharecropper. It was a rental home, and I grew up there until my dad passed away when I was in high school. My mother bought a mobile home, moved it close to my sister and brother-in-law, and that's my first experience living in a house with indoor plumbing. And we felt like we were poor, but looking back and understanding that we had a mom and dad that loved us and gave everything they could to provide for us, we were really rich in so many other ways and very blessed.
So I do want to ask about Patty said the bad boy, well, how did you put it?
Maybe I shouldn't have said that. The tall, lanky, rough kitchen manager.
All right. Okay. So talk to me about the rough kitchen manager.
Okay.
Dad died.
I was rough after my dad died. I was a drag racer. My transportation was a Triumph motorcycle with an extended front end, straight pipes. Showed up with a Rebel helmet and sideburns. Didn't go with the long hair thing, but I looked rough. I acted rough. To tell you how rough I was, after I was saved, I lost half my vocabulary. So.
I'm going to need to see pictures.
Yeah,
Rick,
there are a
Do,
few.
do you have them? Do you have pictures of the motorcycle?
There's
I
one
think
that
we
I
do.
remember. Yeah.
All right.
To maybe shed a little light on this, right before my mom passed away, we were with her a lot in the hospital and so on. And Eddie was sitting there with Mom maybe 3 or 4 days before
Yeah.
she passed away, and he just said to her, Ruth, what did you think Patty was thinking when I showed up that Sunday afternoon on the motorcycle? And without missing a beat, Mom said, I wondered if she was thinking. But my mom and dad loved Eddie. I mean, after he was saved, he totally changed, and they truly did love him.
What was it like when your dad passed away?
It
was it expected, an accident?
Yeah, no, it was a heart attack.
Okay.
This was his third heart attack, and
How old was he?
he was 56. And I thought my dad was an old man. Since I'm way past 56.
Thank you. I'm 56 now.
Yeah. I realized he really died very young.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't unexpected. Doctors had taken him out of work, put him on a special diet. Then there was no bypass surgery. There were no stents, no really cardiac procedures. They just used diet and waited on the next heart attack. And so it was, being that age, I don't know that I really comprehended how serious his condition was. But
How old were you? You were how old?
I was
15?
junior in high school.
16.
I was 16, I guess.
How did that impact you?
I don't know that I really remember what all of that felt like. Funerals were done very different then. I remember that his body was brought to my sister and brother-in-law's home. His body stayed in the home until the funeral service was there overnight. And that's just the way things were done then. And it was very difficult. And watching my dad. And probably the hardest part for me, I don't really remember that much about the funeral, but I remember going to the graveside, and when his body was lowered into the grave, that was just, that's when I really broke.
Okay.
And Eddie was the youngest of 4, Rick. His older brother and sister were almost like parents to him. Ralph and Gay were married when you were very young.
Yeah. My earliest memory of a family, Ralph was married, and I grew up with my nieces and nephews. I've got nieces and nephews that are like a year younger than me. So we grew up more like brother and sister rather than being their uncle. But,
Yeah. Well, Patty, tell me about your life. You were 17 when you met. So were you still in high school?
I was still in high school. Yes.
We're at
Alexander Central. Grew up in Alexander County, and I've already mentioned that Mom and Dad were farmers. Mom went to work at her first public job just so that our family could have insurance when I was probably 12, maybe 12 years old. Growing up on the farm it's a wonderful life, but it's a hard life. I mean, we grew up getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning, going to the barn to take care of the farm animals there. Then we'd be on to the tobacco fields to work the tobacco, then to the hay fields. Everything surrounded Mom and Daddy's country store. So neighbors were like family. I mean, a couple houses up from us, there was an elderly couple that we called Ma and Pa, and they were of no relation whatsoever, but they would help us when we primed tobacco, and we just called them Ma and Pa. One of the things that I guess touched my life growing up more than anything was when my cousin Gary was killed in Vietnam. And growing up there in the store,
What was his name?
His name was Gary.
Gary.
Robert Gary Hayes. Gary was killed in January of 1969. But it was during that 67, 68, 69 period, and I was 10, 11, 12 years old during that time. But the store was a gathering place. I mean, not so much in the summer, but in the wintertime, people would gather, play checkers around the old stove in the back of the store. Every morning about 10 o'clock, the farmers would show up for their Coke and peanuts or RC Cola and peanuts. If there was a little downtime, the guys a little older than me, those that were going to be going to Vietnam, they would show up and maybe pitch horseshoe there beside the store, or there was a grease pit. They could come change the oil, work on their cars, do that kind of thing. So as a 12, 13-year-old, I really looked up to these guys, and then they started one by one going to Vietnam. And it just changed the whole atmosphere, that these guys were going to war. And then in 67, I believe it was, our first young man was killed in Vietnam, Blaine Daniels. And then in 69, Gary was killed. Kind of shaped our lives in knowing, that was really the first time that death touched my family. I still had all my grandparents and even had 3 of my great-grandparents. So
And he was your cut?
He was my cousin, yeah. Gary was my cousin.
First cousin?
Yeah, second cousin. He was
Okay.
my second cousin. But it was just a tragedy that touched the entire community. And there again, because the community was family, we would go to our neighbor's house and hand tobacco. Daddy would stand, remember the old wooden drink crates that the glass bottles came in? Daddy would stack those up so we could reach the tobacco scaffold. I don't remember ever not working, Rick. People ask me now, why do you keep working so hard? I don't know anything else. That's just what we did. I tell people I could drive the tractor before I could even reach the clutch with my foot. Daddy would put me on the tractor, put it in granny gear, and tell me to stay between the bales of hay so they could load the trailer. Growing up on the farm, you just work. I never went to the beach. I never saw the ocean until Eddie and I were married. Our first anniversary, he took me to the beach, and I saw the ocean.
So your cousin was killed in action in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
How old would you have been?
13.
13.
I had turned 13 January the 2nd, and Gary was killed the 10th or the 15th. The 10th
Right.
and the 15th are his birthday and his date of death, but I get them mixed up sometimes. I had just turned 13.
That was at a time when the country was
Very divided.
literally coming apart, it seems. And there were a lot of protests. Were you aware of any of that, and how did you feel about it with the loss of your brother?
I was aware,
Or with
only
your cousin.
my cousin, only aware to the point that when we would see the news, I would see the protests and so on. And knowing that Gary was there fighting, Gary had become engaged just before he was drafted and went ahead and did his basic training and so on. And then he and his wife's name was Mama Jean. He and Mama Jean got married when he came home. He wanted to go ahead and get married. And then ended up in Vietnam. And, we had all these guys that were over there, and you think, they're willing to go and fight in this war for the United States of America. How can we not support them? That was, as a teenage girl, that was my thought. Gary's over there fighting. You need to be writing him a letter, encouraging him. One of the saddest things that happened, Rick, was my aunt had sent a care package for Gary's birthday. She had made cookies and some of his favorite things and wrapped those and sent them to him in Vietnam. And several weeks later, after his death, that package is returned marked undeliverable. And that was in 1969. In 1974, when Eddie and I got married, my aunt, again, growing up on the farm and in the country, my aunt was my seamstress. She made all of mine and my sister's clothes. and I wanted her to make my wedding gown. So she made my wedding gown for our wedding, and when I went down to try it on, she told me I could go into she called it the little bedroom, and it was what had previously been Gary's bedroom. And when I took the dress and opened the door to walk in that bedroom, Gary's cap was still hanging on the bedpost where he left it the day that he went to Vietnam. And so that would have been, 5 years later. And she had never, I'm sure she had moved it maybe a time or two, but it was still hanging right where he left it.
My earliest memory is of my daddy. My earliest sustained memory is of my daddy coming home from Vietnam. So that's a period of time that just absolutely it fascinates me.
Yeah, praise the Lord, he came home.
Yeah. Well, he was never a grunt. He was in the rear with the gear, as he always said. So,
one more interesting fact: several years after Gary passed away, he was a sergeant, leader of his platoon, but one of his guys came to my uncle and aunt's house to introduce them to their son. He had recently married and had a new son, and they named him Robert Gary because he said Gary saved his life.
Wow.
So.
All right. How did you two wind up meeting? How did your paths finally collide?
Well, I went to work one Saturday, and a lady that Patty rode to work with, she came to me in the kitchen. She said, "Eddie, Patty and Paul have broke up. It's your chance."
Now, had you seen her? Had you met?
Oh, she had
ponytail.
long dark hair. She had it up in a little bun and this little bouncy ponytail. I thought she was the cutest girl I had ever seen in my life, but I never dreamed she would ever even speak to me at all. And I was trying to work up courage to ask her for a date.
Now, did you actually know each other?
Oh yeah, we knew each other. I worked at the fish camp at that time too, and Eddie mentioned Paul. I was a junior in high school, and Paul and I had been dating several months, and people began to say to me, "He really likes you. He really cares for you. You're going to be getting a diamond." And Rick, the more I thought about that, I did really like him. We were both Christians, and our idea of a date was going to a revival service somewhere or a singing or, we did all the church things. His name was Paul. How can you go wrong with that?
Yeah.
And I did really like him. He was a great guy. But when the whispers started coming to me that he's probably going to give you a diamond.
Now, are you talking about him or are you talking about...
No, I'm talking about Paul.
Oh.
And
did you know Paul?
No, never met Paul.
Never met Paul.
Okay, all right.
But my parents really liked him. He had a great reputation. But when those rumors started coming to me, he's probably going to give you a diamond. I knew in my heart, Rick, I really liked this guy. He was a great guy. But I wasn't going to marry him. That love was not there. I really liked him, but I couldn't say that I loved him. So I thought, maybe this is moving way too fast. Maybe we should just break things off. And so...
Please tell me you didn't give him the "I just want to be friends" speech. Don't make me come over this table.
I don't remember saying I just want to be friends. But I did tell him, I'm hearing things that you might be about to give me a diamond, and I don't want you to be embarrassed if I say no, because I knew that I could not accept that. And so I guess maybe we did just kind of leave it at let's be friends. I know he even called my mom, wanted my mom to talk to me, to get us back together. And I just knew it was not to be.
Paul, if you're out there listening or watching, don't call her mama.
Don't call her mama. Well, you can't call her mama now, but...
The thing I remember most, I told you the story about I just showed up on the motorcycle.
He did.
I was so bashful and backward, I couldn't ask for a date. And I finally just worked up enough courage that, I'll go by our house and pretend I'm just riding by, And they were sitting out under a shade tree, and I just pulled in, and we went
on the motorcycle. And I had a motorcycle too, Rick.
Did you really?
I did.
And the history, no, it was a Honda. I had the motorcycle. Honda's not a motorcycle.
Eddie says a Honda's not a motorcycle, but I had a motorcycle.
Now, what'd you have?
I had a Triumph Tiger 750, and
Okay.
and the story is when I would cross the bridge at midnight and twist the throttle on it, they could hear me, and that
8
was
miles away.
almost 8 miles away. They could hear me coming.
Yeah, we did.
But I just showed up that Sunday, and we went motorcycle riding. Wound up back at Lenny's Mill and sat there and talked a while. And I was going to ask her for a date the next Saturday night at fish camp. And so all week I'm waiting for Saturday night to come. Got to work on Saturday, and I was back there doing prep work. And my brother Ralph, the owner, he came back there and he said, Eddie, said they need you at Hickory. And my week of working up my courage went out the window. I was mad. Took off on that motorcycle, went to Hickory, which is 50 miles away probably. Worked over there, and I worked like a madman trying to get done, hoping I could get back to fish camp at Stony Point before they left. And I was on the wrong side of the speed limit from the time I left Hickory till I got to Stony Point. And
You weren't speeding, you were qualifying.
yeah, I was qualified, and got there, and I don't know that I ever really asked for a date. I just asked her to be okay if I came. People that see me get up now and preach in front of groups of people, and I've actually had invocation before millions of people, and I'm comfortable with that now. But then I couldn't talk to anybody. I didn't ask her for a date. I just showed up. When we were engaged, I got the ring and wrapped it, and she unwrapped it and put it on and didn't give it back, and I took that as a yes.
He didn't ask me to marry him. He just gave me a ring.
I never asked Janie to marry him.
And
It's all one big misunderstanding.
I never asked her parents for her hand in marriage, but I did wonder how they were going to react. And the one thing I remember most, the next time I saw her daddy, he just looked at me and smiled. And he just walked around grinning. And now I understand.
She's your problem
back,
now.
No, he had 4 girls and a farm. Yeah. He saw a farm hand in this guy. He knows how to work because I'd already been over there. I loved her so much. I loved her so much that I would leave. I would go over there and help them prime tobacco, get up hay, do anything just to be with her. And it was, he just liked having me around.
Tell Rick what Daddy did after we got married, though. He asked you.
After we got married, I was down there helping him on the farm one morning, and I was still working at fish camp at that point in time. And he said, Eddie, he said, are you going to help me on the farm? I said, yeah, I'll help you on the farm. The next morning when I got down there was a brand new Massey Ferguson 245, so we would both have a tractor to work on. And he became a father to me. They were parents to me. I told you how I grew up. And where I grew up was on the Catawba River. My claim to fame is I'm older than Lake Norman. Lake Norman didn't exist when I was a boy. It was Catawba River. They just became family to me, and it was...
Eddie knew none of his grandparents. None.
Never have no memory of any grandparents. And then when me and Patty got married, started dating, she had great-grandparents. So when our daughter was born, there were 5 generations living at that time. And so it was a whole different world to me, getting to understand the feeling of grandparents and family.
If you go back though, Rick, back up in our story just a little bit, when we started dating, that August 26th was that first day we took that ride on that motorcycle. 1973, August 26th. In 1974, on August 25th, we got married. We started dating the end of August. In January 2nd of 74, which was just 4 months later, 5 months later, he gave me that ring. I graduated high school on Sunday night, the end of May, last Sunday in May. On Monday, we had found a house that we wanted to buy. So I graduated high school on Sunday night. On Monday morning, we were at the lawyer's office to sign papers to buy a house. And that summer, he would come over and we would paint and work on the house a little bit. Got married in August of that same year. So he was 21.
Yeah.
I was 18.
And my drag car was converted back into a family car.
And I didn't have a car, Rick.
Yeah.
I just had my motorcycle.
Yeah.
Dad told me that I could buy a car when I had the money to buy a car, and I had money to buy a motorcycle first, so that's what I did.
Yeah.
You talked about when did you become a Christian?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
We were dating, and it was in October. They were having revival, and I was over there on Sunday afternoon, and revival started that night. And I told her, I said, let's go to a movie tonight. And she said, I can't go to a movie. We've got church. I said, well, you hadn't even asked your daddy. She said, ain't no use to ask my daddy.
I knew where I would be that night.
And she said, you can go with me. And I said, nah. I said, I'll just go on home. I got on my motorcycle, took off mad, run down to got as far as the church, and I just pulled over in the parking lot of the church to smoke me a cigarette. It's hard to smoke a cigarette riding a motorcycle at 60 miles an hour. So I stopped and smoked a cigarette, and I sat there and I thought, and I just kind of in my mind, I thought, I'd rather be at church with her as to be at home alone. And so I went back to her house and I said, I'll go to church with you if you won't be embarrassed for them to see me the way I'm dressed. And she
How were
said,
you dressed?
He would be dressed perfectly now.
Yeah.
Then, not so much.
Ragged blue jeans, Western shirt, and my Rebel helmet. My hair was a little long, but not that long. I did have the Elvis sideburns down to here, and I kept those for a while. But and we went to revival that night. Then I think it was on Monday night when we were at revival, and I don't remember the preacher's name. I don't remember what his text was. He made one statement in the sermon that I do remember. He said, I don't make a practice out of trying to scare the hell out of people, but if it'll work, I'll do it. And they gave the invitation at the end of service, invited all believers to come to the altar, be praying for people that were lost. And she got up from beside me and went to the altar. And I'm sitting there alone. And now I understand I was under the conviction of the Holy Spirit. And the altar was full. The preachers were beyond the altar up near the pulpit. There was a rail around both sides, and there was no way to get to where the preachers were. And I wanted to, so I came up to the altar. I stepped up on the piano bench. I stepped up on top of the piano, an old upright piano, and over that to get back there to where they were, and they prayed with me, and I was saved.
But Ricky, you'd have to know he truly was under the conviction of the Holy Spirit. He would have never done anything like that to draw attention to himself.
And they, I don't remember what I prayed or anything. I just remember when I left the church that night, everything felt different. I couldn't wait to get back to church the next Sunday morning. I was going to church with her on Sunday morning. We went back to church, went into the Sunday school class. There were like 8 people in the class.
Maybe.
And Kent Bowles was our Sunday school teacher. and they started reading scripture, and each member of the class was reading a verse of scripture. And after she read hers, she handed me the book, the Sunday school book, for me to read one. In front of 8 people? I couldn't do that.
He froze.
I was frozen. I couldn't even speak. She told me later, she said, I was beginning to think you couldn't even read. But that's how bashful and backward and shy I was. But then the pastor of the church told me, he said, we need to go ahead and baptize you. So I was baptized in a mountain mill pond stream on a drizzly, rainy day in November of 1973.
But that was at Lenny's Mill where we first rode those motorcycles on that first Sunday that we dated.
We went there on our first, well, it wasn't an official date, but that's where we showed up riding motorcycles. That's where we had our first kiss.
Rick didn't ask that.
All right.
Under the race at the water wheel. And that's so much has happened to us there. And we still go back. Occasionally we'll go back by the mill and stop. Sometimes we'll go and have a picnic, and it's a special place for us. And it's a place that we always connect to, and it's our life's been a great one. It's I don't recommend everybody get married in a year after you meet your girlfriend, but it worked for us, and I can't wrap my mind around it. It's been 50 years.
One of the interesting things about that too, though, Rick, always in my life, I mean, I was saved at 11 years old, and somehow I always felt in my heart that I would be a pastor's wife. And so, you know, when I was dating Paul, I could kind of see that happening, that coming to fruition. But then when I started dating Eddie, and I really fell in love with him, and I thought, you know, well, I was really mistaken about that being a pastor's wife thing. I don't think that'll ever happen. And I don't know that I ever even shared that with Eddie until years later. But we married in 1974, and it was in March of 1983 that for several months I sensed that something was going on with him. He was troubled about something. And even after we were married, Eddie was never, he's still not a conversationalist. If I feel like there's something troubling him, I kind of have to pull it out. And so we got home from the fish camp one Saturday night, and our first 2 children had been born. And I don't remember if we had picked them up at Mom and Dad's. They babysat so we could work. And I don't remember if we picked them up that night or not. But I know when we got home, I just began to question him. Please tell me what's wrong. What is going on with you? And this went on for several hours. We talked, and finally, I don't know, do you remember, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, it's on up in the morning.
He just broke down, and he said, I feel like that God is calling me to preach. And you can tell this part better than I can.
And I couldn't even speak in front of people. How was I going to preach? And it was just, on Sunday morning, we went into church. We were late getting there because of being up so late that night. We were late getting into church. We walked in the door, and her dad was up leading the choir. He led the choir for years and years. And if my memory wasn't gone, I'd tell you the song.
Stand up, stand up for Jesus.
Stand up for Jesus. And then at the end of service, I went to the altar and shared what I was burdened with the pastor. And our next door neighbor, and our former pastor's son was at the altar beside me, and we were big buddies. We hunted together, fished together, spent a lot of time together. He was making a rededication of his life, and I surrendered to the gospel ministry. And the rest is history. I've been pastoring over 40 years now, and enjoy what I do. I see how God has blessed in it.
Well, now you missed a lot of history there and all that educational process.
Well, here's the thing. I would assume that you want to get ready and kind of focus on the service. Why don't we? Can we come back next Sunday?
Yeah.
And do the second part, because I don't want to rush through anything.
Yeah.
I think
there's some good stories to tell. Probably the most interesting story in our lives is our first day back from our honeymoon, and we'll share that with you next week.
Oh, goodness gracious.
It is unreal.
That's a
All
whole
right.
segment in and of itself. Shoo.
stay tuned.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, is that all right?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
all
great.
right.
Thank you, Rick.
If you're looking for a church home,
or do you want to be part of a family?
If you're looking for a place to worship.
If you have questions about your faith.
If you'd like to talk to somebody about being a Christian.
Come see us at Maplewood.